Welcome into episode 278 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, the Bruins homestand post All-Star break has concluded. We'll dive into all of it. We might as well start right away. Their latest game was a win over the Dallas Stars. Bridget, Scott, opening shifts.
Bridget, want to go first?
Sure, I will go first. So I guess it makes sense for me to go first too, because this is the first thing that happened. It happened before the game. It was Marchand's 1000th game celebration, and we got a chance to see all the video tribute that they do in the beginning, but then also in the first media timeout of the first period, they did a video where players from around the league reached out and said congrats to Marchand, and that included some guys that he skates with in the summer, like McKinnon and Crosby, Krug, some of the former teammates around the league. Tyler Seguin was in the video as well. But former teammates were in the one that are retired now or in the Bruins organization were in the ones in the pregame, and that was Zdeno Chara, David Krejci, Patrice Bergeron, Ray Bourque. And Marchand after the game told me that yesterday Bobby Orr called him, and he thought that was like unheard of. Like he couldn't believe that he was getting a phone call from Bobby Orr. So it's been great. He said he's had so many people reach out for his 1000th game, and they got the win for it. So it looked like it could have been, kind of a day that got a little bit of the wind taken out of it. But instead, Marchand, who apparently decided to fight / hug during the game, and then had an important role later in the shootout, and it ended up being a memorable day for him with the ceremony and just the way that things turned out with the win.
Yeah, I feel like Brad Marchand being surprised by a call from Bobby Orr is kind of like when Taylor Swift still acts surprised when she wins awards. It's like, dude, you're in the group, like you're a Bruins legend. You get calls from other Bruins legends.
I think this surprise more comes from like when you think about it when you're a kid. Like, do you like when you foresee this moment, you don't really like it. It doesn't come until it's right there and you are actually experiencing it. That's what I mean. Think about it. If you were growing up as a kid and you were like a big NHL fan, and you want to make the NHL, it would be huge if Bobby Orr randomly called you at any point for any reason. So
he does. He does randomly call me sometimes.
Oh, okay. Wow, lucky you.
No. Yeah, so my opening shift is perhaps the other biggest story from the day, and that was the NHL debut of Justin Brazeau and his first NHL goal. He was on an AHL contract, so they had to sign him to an NHL contract. It's a 2-year, two-way deal, cap hit of $775,000. And he gets called up before yesterday's game, makes his debut at 26 years old. It's been a long road for him. He was undrafted out of the OHL. His first 3 pro seasons, he spent time bouncing between the AHL and the ECHL. Never had an NHL contract. Started out in the Toronto organization. This is his 3rd year with the Bruins. But he's really made a push and risen up the ranks. Call him a late bloomer or whatever, but he had a strong training camp in preseason for the Bruins. And people might not remember this, but he hung around pretty deep into training camp, which obviously is a sign of like a guy that the team wants to keep taking a look at. At one point, they announced that he had been sent down to Providence camp. And then he was back at practice the next day and played in the next preseason game again. So it was almost like even after they caught him the first time, they're like, well, you know what? Wait a second. I want to see that Brazeau kid one more time. And so he's obviously been on their radar. He's had a good season in Providence playing on lines with Georgi Merkulov, Fabian Lysell. So he's up in the lineup. And he comes up and he gets 5 shots on goal in his NHL debut in a little over 11 minutes. On an effective 4th line with Anthony Richard and Jesper Boqvist, who I don't think the 3 of them were ever like all together as a line in Providence, but they have all played with each other at various points. So there is some chemistry there. But you saw what he's going to do best. He gets to the front of the net. That's where he scores his goal. He's obviously hard to move. He's 6'5". He's listed at 245. I think he's actually lost some weight since since that registered. But either way, a big body and not someone that's going to be easy to move. On his goal, he got position on Ryan Suter, who, while we're talking about career games, he's over 1,400. So, that's not some rookie you're pushing around. That's, a veteran who's been around. So, it was an impressive debut for Brazeau.
Yeah, I mean,
this subject, we have probably so much more to say, but we'll save it for after Brian's opening shift because there's a lot there.
There is a lot there. And yeah, I mean, it was definitely an instant upgrade, I feel like, in a lot of ways on that fourth line. So for me, I just kind of want to get a pulse check on from you two and listeners on where this Bruins team is right now. Because if you look at the standings, they are second in the National Hockey League, 3 points behind Vancouver. They're first in the Eastern Conference. They're first in the Atlantic. They're leapfrogging with Florida as of late. But so I understand clearly in the standings, the Bruins, they're high in the sky and all is well. Got it. But I want to ask what matters most to you guys and to Bruins fans because, basically there were stretches over this last 7-game homestand, a homestand where they went 2-3-2. And they had some losses where I would hear afterwards, they played really well, everything but the result, they deserved better. And I just want to know if those same people now, after yesterday's win against Dallas, will say, you know what? They didn't really deserve the game. They got the 2 points, great, but they didn't play well. So I want to know what matters most to people. Does collecting points matter most, or does playing well matter most? Because this team, points-wise, will be in the playoffs. So I don't care if they finish first in the conference or if they finish in a wild card spot. Now, obviously, if they finish wild card, it means that their play might be slipping in the points. But I want them playing the right way come playoff time. And that win against Dallas, I mean, you get outshot 46-30. Overtime and in the shootout, you constantly gave Dallas chances to win that game. The Bruins were lucky to get the win. So I just want to see if the same people who were applauding them for strong efforts in defeat, which I agree with, and then if they're going to be consistent and say, you know what, that was not good enough yesterday despite the 2 points. And what matters most to you guys with this team down the stretch? It's playing well, right?
Yeah, for sure. And, as Jim Montgomery said after the game, results are funny sometimes. So he highlighted the previous 3 games. To me, there were 2 games on this homestand that they lost that I thought they quote unquote deserved to win. And that would be Tampa Bay and Seattle. I thought they were the better team in both of those games. Again, deserved in quote marks because you don't deserve anything in hockey, but they probably deserve to win those games. The Kings game I felt a little differently about because while they were better for long stretches of that game, they also just made too many mistakes in the third period that you can't make when you're trying to close out a game. And even late in the second period when they were up 3-1. So that one I feel differently about because it's like, okay, you did a lot of good things to get the lead, but some problems that have popped up throughout the season with not being able to close out games resurfaced again. So to me, you don't deserve to win if you can't close it out and you make too many mistakes. And yeah, the Dallas game, Dallas was the better team, especially through the first 40 minutes. They borderline dominated much of the first 2 periods, and it was 2-2 going into the third. One thing I would flip on this in terms of, any potential hypocrisy about results versus way you play, if we're going to rip them for the collapse against the Kings and not having what it takes to close out a game or not wanting it or whatever you think the issue is, well, then you also have to give them credit for quote unquote wanting it or having desperation to come back and tie up the Stars and get it to overtime. Like that, there was desperation down the stretch and you end up with the tying goal in an extra attacker situation on a great pass by Charlie McAvoy and a great one-time finish by David Pastrnak. So if you're going to, rip those guys for not doing enough to close out a game, you do also have to give them credit for coming back multiple times because they trailed Dallas multiple times and came back.
Yeah, the part where it was feeling like more of the same, not being able to close out narrative was when they gave up that third goal and in the third, and it's like, okay, well, they're down by one late again. Are they going to be able to find one here? And of course, it comes with from Pasternak, and it was such a great, like, it was such a like a deceptive play that McAvoy made, where he was completely not looking in the direction of Pasternak, just backing his defender off until that lane opened wide, like wide open passing lane for the perfect one-timer from a place that Pasternak scores so often. So it was also Swayman's the most saves Swayman has ever made in a game. That's how much they got outshot by, though. Like you mentioned, Brian, like they allowed a lot of shots on goal to the point where it was like a record for Swayman, who played really well. And it kind of brings us back around to that. Sometimes their goaltending might have to bail them out. And he played so well. And in the shootout too. And he's one of those weird people who says he loves the shootout. A lot of goalies don't, but he thinks it's great. In terms of like, should we be, or are people going to be critical of them even though they won, like, or should we be more critical of losses, or like that looked good, or results when they win but don't look good? I think people just find a way to kind of complain, and I mean, it's our job to analyze it as well, so we can talk about the good and the bad of everything and not really get too high or low unless it's like really obviously a horrible trend in the wrong direction that is gonna be concerning come playoff time. But there was one concern that actually is, something that we need to bring up. And Scott, this was originally going to be your opening shift, but the Bruins win, but Hampus Lindholm gets injured and does not come back to the game.
Yeah, he Lindholm went down early in the third period. Just kind of an awkward play in the corner where he got tangled up with the Stars player. I think he maybe like banged / jammed his knee into the boards and then fell awkwardly, was slow getting up, slow getting off. He initially stayed on the bench, and then the next TV timeout, he took a little twirl around, kind of shake things off. You could see him flexing that left leg, kind of massaging it a little. And then he gets back to the bench and goes right down the tunnel, and that was it. Montgomery didn't have any update after the game. He said they would know more Tuesday. I'm guessing there's probably some sort of evaluation before the team gets on the plane out west. Obviously, first, I guess, just to know, is he going on a trip? Is there a chance he plays sometime over these next 4 games? Obviously, it'd be, pretty concerning if he's not traveling. That means he's out at least 4 games. So there's no Bruins media availability on Tuesday, so I guess we won't know anything until Wednesday. But yeah, obviously, if it's short term, if it's minor, all right, you deal with it for a game or 2 or whatever it is and figure it out. If it's longer term, then yes, I would say that, that would dramatically impact how Don Sweeney approaches the trade deadline.
Oh yeah, that's you were talking about adding like maybe a bottom pair defenseman, and now you're going to like, okay, well now you have a hole in your top 4, so you got to almost look for a higher quality defenseman in that case. But obviously still early to tell, and it was awkward. So I hate when it just kind of like the Patra injury. It's like, it doesn't look that bad, and even if you go back and watch it, like you can see like the actual collision isn't what does it. It's like the very end of it where his knee gets like pushed like a tiny bit in a weird direction, and then he goes down, and you can tell, like, obviously it put him right off balance, and it wasn't a strong enough hit to knock you over, so that's how you know something like happened in his leg to cause him to fall. And the fact that I don't think he took another shift after that, so he just, like Scott said, got on there and just like tried it out and then went down the tunnel. So we'll see about that, but that obviously changes our conversation about the trade deadline and about what the needs are. Because as of yesterday, I think, Brian, No, it wasn't you that texted me this. It was our coworker Nick who said like this Shattenkirk Forbort pair is just killing me. So like we're already talking about how some of the defensemen are not they're not performing super well right now. I know Scott's been on Forbort for a while. Raycroft on Sunday Skate Razor completely disagreed with you about this. He likes Forbort, and obviously Forbort's not really tradable at the trade deadline, but Scott and maybe over the course of the rest of the season, you and Razor are gonna butt heads on the Forbort topic.
Well, and what, like I said, like my issue with Forbort right now, even beyond his play, is how dumb he made me look on Twitter Saturday, because I actually tweeted out a defense of like why he's still playing, highlighting some fancy stat stuff about how few high danger chances he gives up when he's on the ice, how teams don't get chances at the net front. And he played like maybe his worst game of the season on Saturday. Like I think that was like the first period when I tweeted that out. And like the next 45 minutes of that game were just brutal for him. So
did you delete it? Were you like, JK?
No, it's still up there. Still getting roasted in the quote tweets. So
that's what happens when you go out on a limb. When your original opinion was that you were concerned with his play as of late, and then you tried to convince yourself that you were, you were trying to be unbiased and see if you could prove yourself wrong, but.
Let that be a lesson, kids. Never be nice to people. Never give anyone the benefit of the doubt.
Never. Except for that, as a goaltender, apparently, you'd rather have Forbort out there than a lot of other guys, because Razor said that's the kind of guy that you need in front of your goalie in the playoffs, and that's who he would want. So, Brian, your thoughts on that pair, like Wotherspoon not being in, and what they should do if they're missing Lindholm?
Well, I mean, if they're missing Lindholm, you still have a number one defenseman, and most teams, if they were to lose a Lindholm type, they would have no more number one defenseman. So I still don't think the Bruins have. I think you bring up Lohrei, obviously. I think that's kind of a a natural decision. I think he should be up there regardless. But the Bruins don't have the capital to make anything crazy happen. They're hamstrung, so it is what it is. And I feel this way about this team, whether or not they have Lindholm in the lineup or not. Like I just think if this team is as good as everybody says that they are, then they shouldn't need to add much, really. And we saw what happened. Like they should be good enough to roll with what they have, right? If everybody thinks that they're truly one of the best teams in the league, which I don't necessarily dispute. I'm just saying, like you can't on the one hand be like, oh well, they're one of the top teams in the league, and they've been showing it all year. And then I understand like Lindholm goes down as a big piece. I understand that, but I think you just replace it internally with Lohrei, because you don't have the capital to do it. You have to trust this team. It's why, even if it's why like the Bruins wouldn't be in on the Lindholm stuff. Like I don't think Elias Lindholm, that is, like at center. It's like Coyle and Zacha, their numbers are good. Like their numbers are better than Elias Lindholm's this year. Like it's I think this year, for the most part, it's you have to kind of just trust the players that are there and see what they can do. Kind of the opposite approach of last year. If you want to find a complementary player, that's fine. But as far as Forbort goes, I think Razor's right. I think that people are very quick to shit on him, and I understand why. I'm watching the games that they're watching. I see that his foot speed's not there. I see that he's missing assignments and that he's having some boneheaded plays. But when Razor says you need that guy in the playoffs, you do. And Forbort is the only guy that they have that's like that, that's going to sit there and eat shots left and right and do the things that nobody really wants to do in the playoffs. Do you want Charlie McAvoy blocking those shots that Forbort blocks all the time? No. As far as Wotherspoon goes, he still has some stripes to earn a little bit. I just don't know what people want. Like, what are you gonna do? What can you do with Forbort? Like, you need a guy like that. I agree he's not playing great, but you need a guy like that in your third pair. Who's replacing him? Like
what are
you gonna do with him?
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, this is probably more of a hot take than anything else that Razor said. But he was like, if you wanted to trade Forbort at the trade deadline, he'd probably get you more than most anyone else like that you'd
I
be
think
willing to trade.
I heard that, and I don't necessarily disagree. Like, again, if you're a contender, I mean, who do you think a Stanley Cup team values more? Like, okay, so who's the alternative, right? Like Matt Grzelcyk, right? Like, does like the Colorado Avalanche, for example? I know every team's different because some teams have things that other teams don't, but like when Colorado has Cale Makar and Devon Taves and Sam Girard and Bo Byram, if those guys are all healthy, like what do you need Grzelcyk for? You don't. You want somebody like a forward if you're going to add something. Like I'm just like championship teams very much value like that's that big body who can block shots. Simply put. Now, if you're a contender that's lacking transition game, yeah, then maybe Grzelcyk. But I think most contenders probably have some good transition defensemen.
Yeah, I'll stand by the same thing I said on Sunday Skate too, which is that if someone wants to give me a first round pick for Derek Forbort, I'm taking it and throwing a parade for Don Sweeney. If you can even get like a second, that would be incredible. I've been of the opinion that anything that involves moving Forbort, I almost think like you have to throw in an asset as some sort of cap dump. But if they could get like a real asset for that and then turn that around as ammunition to go get, a more well-rounded upgrade, like I would be all for that. I just don't think it's realistic. And, I think, Brian, to your point about like Forbort has some value when he's on his game. That's why they're continuing to play him, because he's still working back from his injury issues. And at the very least, they owe it to themselves to see what they have before the trade deadline to know, like, okay, either he's tracking the right way and he's still playable, or boy, we just don't think he's going to get it back this season. We actually do have to do something there. Like, you can only figure that out by playing him. So saying, oh, he had a bad game Saturday, let's bench him for the next week. Okay, well, now you've lost one of 2.5 weeks leading up to the trade deadline. Like, you can't do that. So and if he's still here after the deadline, then you owe it to yourself to try to get him right for the playoffs, so he does have value for you, so that he is a useful player come the postseason. So yeah, there's gonna be hiccups and there's gonna be some ugly games, and we've seen a few of those recently. But I also get why they're playing him, even though it's tempting to sit there and say Wotherspoon's maybe had some better games recently. Why not just play Wotherspoon every game over him? And it's like, because there's a bigger picture in mind that this team has to be looking at.
I'm not saying Forbort has to be an every single day defenseman for them. He could be their seventh defenseman. I'm just saying, like, when you go to the playoffs, like, I'd rather have, if you want to go out there and get a Jacob Middleton and your third D pair is Middleton and Shattenkirk or Middleton and Wotherspoon or Forbort, and it's like a rotation of those guys, that's fine. Like, it's fine. It's interesting to me. Like, people are like, Forbort sucks, get him out of here. But then they want the Bruins to bring in Jacob Middleton at the deadline. It's like, I think Middleton's objectively better than Forbort. I'm just saying, like, it's the same type of player. Like, you're getting rid of one type of player to bring in another potentially. It's like, you trust me. If the Bruins go far this year, I'm sure there'll be a time where Forbort blocks a shot that would have been an automatic goal, and people are going to be like, "Oh, thank God we had that guy." And I also don't think, like, look, in the same breath, and this might sound hypocritical, but your third D pair defenseman on the left side is not make or breaking your Stanley Cup hopes this year. I hate to break it to anybody. Like, Derek Forbort's not going to be the reason the Bruins don't go as far this year as they might. It's just not.
True, but you at least need your third parent to keep their head above water, because I think one of their biggest issues against Florida last year was that Forbort Clifton third pairing got absolutely wrecked in that series. Like, they were poor. And it's not the only reason the Bruins lost, obviously. There's lots of them, but that was one of them.
Yeah, Clifton giving a tape-to-tape pass, in the neutral zone transition to whoever the hell it was in Florida. Like, literally, he could have gone to any one of his teammates, and he goes right up the middle. Like, I'm not going to blame Forbort on that. I think Clifton was very all over the map. He was like, Forbort's not going to. He's going to get burned wide here and there, right? He might get out. Somebody might be a little bit finesse around him because he's whatever, but he's not going to try to do too much. Clifton was doing way too much, and I just think that I don't want to absolve Forbort. It's been a long time since last spring. I don't remember every single game specifically, but I remember watching Clifton and being like, he's all over the place right now. They're just making boneheaded passes. But yeah, I just don't. To me, like there's so many more areas where I think the Bruins need to like I want the Bruins third D pair to be bigger and tougher to play against, and Forbort's like that kind of guy. To me, like I think they could add another player that can help him. Like I think of Middleton, and I'd have to check their hand in this. Are they both lefties, or is Middleton a righty? They're both lefties. All right, so that's kind of one I have to play their offside. But just in general, like I don't want that third D pair to be small. Like I don't want Grizzly on that third D pair, and I'm bringing up Grizzly because it's kind of like him or Forbort, right? People talk about, but like I think like for me, like the Bruins have to address like their bottom six chemistry. I don't know. One of the last things on my mind is like that third D pair guy, like over Forbort. Like I think there's other places they have to address. So and maybe that's internal, like third line. Like again, like I like Brazeau a lot yesterday. I think he could be a homestay on the fourth line, but like I don't know. I don't want to take up too much time, but I just think I don't want to harp on Derek Forbort. Like I think there's other areas that they need to improve upon.
I don't think I've talked in like 8 minutes.
That was 15 minutes ago, so I know.
Well, I think that is a good like transition though, because we wanted to talk about the fourth line, and it goes back to a conversation that we had about what should they be trying out before the trade deadline to see what they have for internal options. And we put the poll out, and to people's credit, some people wrote in Brazeau as an option and explained, okay, he's a bigger body. He can do kind of some of the things the Bruins look like they need. He can be physical. And then we saw Richard's speed. So we see these two call-ups, and it wasn't any of the guys that we listed. It wasn't Beecher. It wasn't Lysell. It wasn't Merkulov. The answer was other, I guess. So Brazeau comes up. Steen gets waived and cleared. He cleared waivers. So now he's back with Providence, and Lauko gets sat. So what it does is really it sparked that fourth line. I think it gave it energy. Like all of a sudden it felt fresh again. It didn't feel stagnant because you throw two guys on that line plus Boquist, who are all fighting to be in the NHL. And it just feels a little bit different. Like you immediately saw them go to work and get things done. Boquist scored the first goal. He's looking more confident. And like Scott mentioned, they have played individually together at different times. So it's not they're 100% unfamiliar with each other. And so far, so good, really, with those moves. I don't think the lineup missed Lauko too much. And Steen, basically what Coach said about Steen when we talked to him before the game with Dallas was basically he did everything he could do, which is kind of like to say, like, he did exactly the amount that, like, he did his best, but it probably isn't enough to keep him around. It's not really, it was like a backhanded compliment, kind of like it felt like a compliment, but then when you think about it, it was like, okay, no, his best wasn't good enough to keep on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, he had 1 point in 34 games. Like you can only roll with that for so long before you have to make a change. So, by the way, Bruins might need another body because we don't know if they're completely healthy up front as they hit the road. Lauko was dealing with an upper body injury. Montgomery didn't specifically say if he could have played Monday or not. He was initially listed as questionable. And then Anthony Richard also took a slap shot off the foot that looked very painful. And he was a little bit in and out the rest of the game. He did take shifts after that, but I don't know if it was quite regular playing time.
Yeah, he went down the tunnel early
Yeah.
third period and came back with like 2 minutes left. But then he took an overtime shift. That was an interesting turn of events. It was like him and Boquist out there together or something like that. And
Yeah, so we'll have to see if they announce another call up either Tuesday or Wednesday, or what exactly the status of those guys are. But yeah, I mean the fourth line as a whole, though, like obviously they had to try something, and now you're at this combination of Richard, Boqvist, Brazeau, where you've got the speed with two of the guys in Boqvist and Richard, and you saw that play a factor Monday on the Bruins' first goal, where that's all speed. McAvoy starts the transition, Richard down the wing, and then Boqvist just flying up the middle, gets behind the defense and makes a really nice play to settle the pass and then take it to his forehand for the finish. And then Brazeau as the big body. And you saw him getting to the net front. You saw what he can do there. So, obviously continue with that until it stops working, assuming Richard's able to continue to play. But, yeah, I don't know if like that's going to stick as the fourth line the rest of the season, or if you trust that as your fourth line in the playoffs. There's a reason that all three of those guys were in Providence much of the season. There's a reason none of them made your team, out of training camp. But it looked good on Monday, and I thought Richard and Boqvist played pretty well on Saturday too. Richard got his first goal as a Bruin in that game. So try it until they give you a reason to not to use it. Try it until they, give you a reason to change it.
They all have a goal in the last two games.
I liked Richard. I like his game, but you know what I wouldn't mind seeing, honestly, as a bottom six combination at some point. And I'm not even talking in the playoffs. I'm just saying at some point to see what it would look like. I would like to see a third line of Frederick, Geeky, and Lysell, maybe, and a fourth line of Beecher centering Brazeau and Heinen. I mean, I think there's size on that fourth line, and you have NHL savvy and veteran leadership in Heinen and steadiness. And then that third line, you have size with a little bit of flash. I just think, like, again, the while on this podcast we all agree that, like, yes, the regular season matters to collect points to make the playoffs, but it's about how you're playing when you get to the playoffs. Because the one benefit, the major benefit to the Bruins being so high in the standings is they do have, maybe not against Florida, cushion, but they have playoff cushion. I think they should use this time to try and see what other combinations they have, because they're not going to fall out of the playoffs. So what do you guys think about a combination of that in the bottom six, potentially?
Yeah, I would still like to see Lysell get a chance at some point. And if he keeps playing the way he's been playing in Providence, at some point it becomes a situation where it's almost like you have to give him a look just because he's earned it, and you want to reward guys just like they have rewarded Brazeau and Richard recently. It's like part of that is, yes, you have to change things up and try something else in your bottom six. Part of it is those guys earned it, and you want to reward them. But I would say the same thing remains true. Like there's still jobs up for grabs in that bottom six. Like nothing's settled yet. Like I just said, like roll with this fourth line until they have a bad game or two. But I don't expect this combination to just like stay together now to the finish line. So I think there's going to be opportunities to give some other guys a chance. So Lysell to me would be next on that list. We'll see if the Bruins agree. Obviously, he brings something different, right? He's more skilled, so he's not going to be on the fourth line. You're moving him up, like you said, probably on the third line to start. But yeah, I would like to see that. And with Brazeau too, the question with him for a long time has been, is his skating NHL level? And I think there's going to be times where we see that come up as an issue, and it'll just be a matter of whether the other good stuff outweighs it. NHL debut, first game goal. It's very easy to focus on the positives and kind of be, like, whoa, diamond in the rough. Look what the Bruins just found, and it's like, all right, let's give it a few games. There's going to be stuff that comes up where you're going to be like, oh, that's why maybe he didn't get a chance before this. So we'll see, but obviously an encouraging start for Brazeau.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, coach said, and I'm trying to look up how many pounds he says he lost, but he said his skating it's getting better and better as he's put the work in, because he's worked his ass off to get down to a certain weight. And I'm trying to I can't find it right now, but yeah, it was a significant amount.
Also, Brazeau's not much of a fighter, which I know some people, on social media looked up and kind of shared yesterday. But people should also be aware of that, because I think people see 6'5" fourth liner and think oh, super tough guy. He's gonna, pound the snot out of everyone. He hasn't been much of a fighter, so don't expect that.
No, but what I thought when I saw his size is I saw puck protection down low, and I saw winning board battles in the corners and in front of the net. Those are the things that win you playoff series. And when I bring up that potential fourth line of Beecher, Brazeau, and Heinen, I see, again, would have to see it, right, to believe it, and see if it could be a strong combination. But I see size, speed, physicality, and face-off production out of Beecher when he's on his game. So if that line's out there and you're winning a lot of face-offs and you're starting off your shifts with possession, that's a strong suit. I see obviously the size and puck protection and ability to be physical with Brazeau, and then I see Danton Heinen, who again just Mr. Professional, just like steady Eddie down there in the fourth line, and just would really calm things down. I could see that fourth line causing problems for teams in a playoff series. I think, admittedly, have to see more from Brazeau to anoint him to this spot. Again, to your point, Scott, one game is not enough, but all you could do so far is the one game, right? And he showed, believe it or not, here's the reality. Brazeau showed more in one game than Lauko and Steen showed in a combined 60 games this year, 70 games this year. So that's the reality of the situation. One game scoring is more than Steen's done all year.
And he almost scored twice.
Yeah. And Richard too. Richard has produced in the last couple of games too. I know we mentioned him too. And I don't mean to discard him and just toss him as a 13th forward. I want Richard around maybe too until he. And so, Scott, to your point about letting that fourth line play until they have a bad game, I understand that. But I don't know. That fourth line combination I mentioned, to me, I want to see that with a Lysell call up just to see if he can do anything in the third line. But playoff series are all about depth, and I think the Bruins would be very wise if the Bruins' top lines are going to be relied on David Pastrnak. So the Bruins rely on David Pastrnak and Brad Marchand on their respective lines. A lot of these top contending teams have a couple of elite players on each of their top two lines, whereas the Bruins have one elite player per their top two lines. The point I'm trying to illustrate here is I don't know if when it comes to the playoffs, I'm not so sure the Bruins' top two lines are going to overpower other playoff teams' top two lines, because where they might not have a David Pastrnak, they might have an Austin Matthews and a Mitch Marner. And like they might have a little bit more firepower in the front lines. So I think the Bruins would be really wise to make sure that their bottom two lines are where they could win playoff series. And I think that tinkering with some of these combinations will help you see what the best options could be.
Well, if that's their strategy, they're still, in my opinion, the bottom six is not going to currently constituted. We haven't seen a whole lot. We haven't seen enough to think that they could win a playoff series for Boston. And that's not to take anything away from Trent Frederick or Morgan Geekie, but they're probably the two bright spots in the bottom six. But it's about finding the rest of it, finding the fourth line of guys that can play together be offensive, but also, like you said, Brian, be good possession guys and not be liabilities. And that was like I think that was the very first thing Montgomery said when asked about like, what does Brazeau bring? And he said puck possession and being heavy down low were the two first things that he said. And those are very important. And that is exactly what we've been talking about over the last few weeks. Like, is there someone in Providence that can do that stuff better than Lauko and Steen? And, you know, we saw that he, in a 1-game sample size, which is small, that the answer was yes. And it looks promising for the future. So in terms of like picking the right call up, as of right now, it looks like this is actually like has a decent hope of being a solution for them in the bottom 6. And then maybe we're not talking about adding Pat Maroon, or maybe we are, because maybe it's still like, all right, he's going to come cheap and we still need a veteran. Like, you could add that too, but at least it does short-term give you an opportunity to look at options before you are deciding about trade deadline stuff. And I don't know, I'm optimistic about it, really. When I think about how that line looked yesterday, it actually, like, the entertainment value was higher. And obviously the drive for those guys is different than like people who have been in the lineup for a while, because it's brand new. I have a chance to prove myself, and he did. So if he takes that mentality for the next few games or however long he gets a look, he's going to be successful, I think. And hopefully that maybe could be contagious to that line and bring them more success.
Yeah. And I want to make sure, like, let's not at all downplay having Frederick, Geekie, and I'll throw Heinen in there too, in your bottom 6, because I know I did this a little bit the last podcast, but like, there's probably not really any team that feels great about their bottom 6. Everyone is lacking depth because the salary cap has barely gone up in 4 years. Teams have not been able to keep guys. So everyone is either young players who maybe aren't quite NHL ready, or veterans bouncing around on cheap deals. And the Bruins have found the veterans who have actually produced with, Van Riemsdyk and Heinen. I think there's a lot of even contenders who would be thrilled to have a Trent Frederick on their third line. Like the team you faced yesterday, Dallas, they might be one team that probably is a little deeper than you up front, but they haven't had the high-end production. Like, Jason Robertson is who you'd look at as like, oh, that's their high-end forward. Well, he's having a little bit of a down year, so he's not Pasternak right now. Vancouver would probably be another that feels really good about their third line. But there's not a lot of those teams, though. Like, I don't think Tampa's one of them. I don't think Florida is. I don't think Toronto is. Colorado is definitely looking to upgrade their middle 6. Like, everyone's kind of dealing with a lot of the same problems.
And if you think about it, like, and that's why I qualified it in the beginning of what I started to say, that Frederick and Geekie are definitely not people that you're concerned about in those roles, because Frederick has outperformed his previous seasons. Geekie has been solid. Those two can score. They're smart players. And even like Van Riemsdyk has been in the bottom 6 at times. And that's somebody that you would say, okay, if that's our bottom 6, like we're looking pretty good. It's just been about when we say bottom 6, honestly, more often than not, we're talking about the fourth line. So like, we don't even need to necessarily drag those guys into it, when obviously it's important to talk about them as well. But the real issues they were having was that fourth line wasn't really doing much of anything. So
every time they roll out Steen and Lauko, it's a waste of a game. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. It's like, they're not it. Like, they're not it. Oscar Steen is not it. And obviously the Bruins waive him and they sent him to Providence. In my opinion, it's like, I don't know why it took him so long. But to your point, Scott, like, yeah, other contenders, like, they would probably want a better bottom 6. And that's why I think, like, that's where the Bruins could really gain an advantage over some of these teams. And maybe it's that the players in Providence that they call up, maybe they're not. Maybe it turns out they're just not good enough. Maybe the Bruins system between Boston and Providence. Maybe they don't have enough to win the Stanley Cup by having a great bottom six. But you got to find out because it's not Steen and it's not Loco. And I was really encouraged by the Brazeau signing. And I just feel there's a ton of. I am optimistic too, Bridget. Like I think that there's a ceiling, I think, for this Bruins team that's untapped right now because the Bruins, for whatever reason, they're unwilling to give a Merkulov or a Lysell an extended third line look. Like I said, put Heinen down on the fourth line. Like that's and Brazeau and Beecher, like that's a big body fourth line with some NHL experience in Heinen, and see if you can get something out of a Lysell or a Merkulov on a third line with Geekie and Frederick, and find that out now, because if you try those lines out or something like that, and you don't find that they're good enough, Bridget, to your point, okay, fine, maybe we're just not good enough, but let's see if there's something else out there on the externally. And every game they just kept rolling out Steen and Lauko. It's like, guys, for Christ's sakes, can we this is not it. They're not helping the team right now, and it's not helping you find out what you need to address because you are not giving internal opportunities either. So I'm glad to see Brazeau get an opportunity. Hopefully that there's more looks to come, because again, when you have this lead in the standings, not over Florida, but when you have this playoff cushion that they have, the Bruins are making the playoffs. They're not making the playoffs. And to me, again, we learned last year, it doesn't matter if you go in as the first seed or the eighth seed. Go in playing the right way. And for my money, the Bruins' priority for the rest of the season shouldn't be let's finish as high in the standings as possible. It should be let's find the best grouping of players as possible and to play the best way that we can. Hopefully that leads to success in the meantime, right? But that's what I want to see. I want to see the best Bruins roster they can put out there. And it starts with giving guys looks in the bottom six. It just does. Your top six is your top six. Coyle, Zacha, those are your guys. Marchand, Bergeron, Van Riemsdyk, DeBrusque. That's your top six.
Did you just say Bergeron?
What did I say?
You said Bergeron.
Oh, boy. Wishful thinking.
I gotta stop you there because do you know something I don't know? Like, did he sign
insider here? Insider. No, 20 years of saying it. No. I almost just said it again. Coyle, Zacha, Marchand, Pastrnak, JVR, DeBrusque. Right now, that's your top six. Maybe you add somebody at the deadline, maybe you don't, but their focus right now, in my opinion, should be tinkering with some of these third and fourth line combinations. And I really think I'm onto something by putting Heinen on the fourth line. He can play anywhere, sure. But I just think that Heinen on the fourth line opens up a spot in that third line and see if a young kid can run with it. I mean, who's the kid in Dallas, Scott? Wyatt Johnston? I mean, not to harp on it, and It's not apples to apples, but, selected 2 picks after Fabian Lysell. He's been in the league for 2 years now. He's one of Dallas's better scorers, and it's like here we are scratching and clawing to see if we can get Fabian Lysell one NHL game, for Christ's sake, and he's playing well. So I don't know. That's if I'll shut up if I see them do that, like one way or the other. That's the one thing I want to see, because regular season NHL hockey, as we know, there's ups and there's downs. The Bruins getting 2 points here and there is not as important to me as finding out the best combination of players that they have. And I guess I'll leave it at that for now.
Sorry, I got a little distracted because as we're recording, Matthew Slater just announced his retirement, so had to go into like WEI breaking news mode and get some alerts out.
Can he play full line?
Yeah, there you go. Hey, he was gunner, straight line hockey. There you go. Up and down, get in on the forecheck.
Yeah, exactly.
Great on special teams, I hear.
Yeah. Indeed.
I did find it appropriate yesterday, though, that Marchand, and I know it was mentioned off the top, we'll circle back to it. So heading into yesterday's game against Dallas, they were 1-3-2 on the homestand at the time, which, you would think they would come out and not get outshot virtually 2-1. But either way, They do tie it late, Scott. That's great resolve. That I believe that was their first extra attacker goal of the season, the last NHL team to accomplish that this year. So they tie the game. Granted, I thought Dallas was the better team in overtime. I also thought that, the Bruins gave Dallas maybe 6 or 7 chances to win the shootout, going around 9. So Jeremy Swayman was obviously huge, and Brad Marchand's shootout goal to tie it was also huge. So in his 1,000th game, I do think Dallas, quote unquote, deserves to win. But as you said, Scott, that means nothing. Maybe the Bruins didn't deserve to win, but they did win, and it gets them feeling good heading into this stretch of games on the road out west against some really good teams. So momentum is a real thing, and it was that was a very important reason as to getting those 2 points. The Bruins can feel good about themselves, and they can get away from home now. So that win yesterday, while they may not have been the better team, it is really important. I don't mean to downplay that. For those reasons, it's important. Brad Marchand is a big reason that they got those 2 points by scoring in the shootout on Ottinger, and in his 1,000th game, just leading as he always does.
And I think Swayman was a big factor as well. I would say like McAvoy, Marchand, Swayman were all pretty big, and those are players that you need to lead you in those situations, and they were. So and Pasternak, like, obviously game tying goal, doing what he does best. So that's all encouraging. Even though there was stretches where it was like, okay, this looks like it's going to be the same old thing, they were able to not let it be. And they were able to win the last game of the road trip, maybe take a little bit of the criticism and pressure off of the conversations that would have been had if they'd lost in regulation. They weren't able to find that game tying goal in the third. And it just, now they can hit the road and reset and not have like the worst possible taste in their mouth. Like, they're leaving on a high note, for like the emotional reasons of the Marchand stuff, and also the win, and chance to build off of it and use what they learned in the road trip to get better and make progress, and use the adversity to help them, like we've mentioned a bunch of times, because that's like the main difference between last year and this year is, they have a chance to make those adjustments and bounce back from stuff. Whereas sometimes last year, they were just so good that their flaws they got exposed, but it still didn't result in losses. So, I don't know. I thought it was encouraging for Swayman, because not that he played bad recently, but before the break, he was playing better. After the break, he was giving up a few that maybe he wouldn't normally give up. And then against Dallas, he was really important and made some key saves.
Yeah. In the shootout, like, gets beat by Robertson in the first round. Then 8 straight rounds, he makes a save. Right? One of them was a poke check. But
and I don't know how many people are stopping that Robertson shot. Yeah,
it's not like guys were missing the net or losing the puck. Like, those had to be legitimate saves. And as far as looking back at like the homestand overall and just kind of where this team stands as they now hit the road, it is also worth noting that, they're the 2 absolute stinkers against Calgary and Washington. Every other game on this homestand, they played at least reasonably well and were in it against pretty good teams. Seattle's out of the playoff picture, but whatever. Like, you ran into a hot goalie, but like Vancouver, they blew out. Now, obviously, that was an off night for Vancouver, but you still have to take advantage of it. Tampa had been streaking, has been one of the hotter teams in the league. Probably should have beaten them. You lose in overtime. Dallas has been one of the hottest teams in the league. You get outplayed by them, but hang around and find a way to win in a shootout. So it's not as much, like, you can look at the overall record in the homestand and be like, boy, that's not good. And it's not. But it's not like they were getting blown out by like some of the top teams in the league, where it's like, oh my God, look at how big the gap is between them and other good teams. No, like, if anything, you should come away thinking like, all right, they're right there. They're not clearly ahead of these other teams. They're also not clearly behind them. Like, this is probably how it's going to go. By the way, they're facing more good teams on this road trip, especially Edmonton and Vancouver. I would expect those to be competitive, close games, and probably one mistake here or there or one bounce like could decide it. So that's how it's going to be for this team. That's what we expected it to be for this team. We didn't think they were going to be like last year where they're just going to roll over everyone and it's clear that they're, head and shoulders better than every other team. Like they're not. They're going to have to grind. They're going to have to battle. These are going to be close games. They get into the playoffs, they're going to be close. Like I know, I was dumb enough to pick them to sweep Florida last year. I'm not going to be picking them to beat anyone in 4 or 5 games this year. Like it's going to be a grind. They're going to have to be longer series.
Scott, I wouldn't be reminding people.
Shout out to me and Bridget for seeing what was ended up becoming reality before it happened. I mean, that Florida team was playing playoff hockey since January. It just didn't love. I didn't love that idea of a. I just not to rehash, but so I mean, so Scott, like to that point, right? Like the Bruins have 77 points. They're second in the NHL, first in the Eastern Conference. Playing these other best teams as measure, it should be it shouldn't even be a question if these teams are in the same league as each other. Like the Bruins are the second best team in the league. So, to have a homestand where it's like we're I'm not saying we're doing this. I'm just saying like in general, like to applaud them over homestand for like keeping up with some top teams. Well, they're supposed to be a top team in the league, right? So I think that kind of is like there's like an underlying message there of like this Bruins team is they're what's the word I'm looking for? They're playing better than expected, or they're overachieving. Maybe they're overachieving where they are in the standings right now. I think that's fair to say. And I think that's why it could be annoying when Bruins fans are interesting. They either have nothing but negative things to say or nothing but positive things to say. And there's really no in between. But when people like say like, oh well, they're second in the NHL, they're first in the conference. What do you want from them? Nothing. Like that's great. Like that's really I'm really happy for them, and they're doing it, Moneyball style. But you have to read between the lines and see like this team. They have if they want to win the Stanley Cup, which is what people want when you're high in the standings. You do have to try to see the forest of the trees a bit and like identify like they're overachieving a little bit on goaltending and just a couple of really really elite players, but there are things to improve upon. And so it's not like that it's not that we're complaining about them or anything like that. It's just that we talk about them 3 times a week, and I wish it were as easy to say look where they are in the standings, that's what's expected of them, but it's just not. And I think, Scott, you kind of mentioning the homestand.
That'd be a pretty boring podcast, wouldn't it?
It would be. But Scott, you mentioned the homestand and being like, it's not like they got like, they played well against Dallas and other good teams. Like, well, they should. They're second in the NHL. But I think that we just know that they're overachieving a little bit so far.
Yeah,
Brian's getting fired up. Brian's getting fired up because it's lunchtime. He's getting hangry.
Is it lunchtime? It's 10.
It's 10.
Where are you, in England?
I'm hungry. Okay, I want lunch.
10:14 time, just for listening.
Yeah, it's the difference
breakfast.
I already ate breakfast. Most people eat that before 10:14, Bridget.
Not me. My breakfast is usually at about 11:30.
Oh gosh.
But yeah, it's the difference between being one of the top teams and the top team. And right now they're one of the top teams with probably a good like 7 to 8 other teams around the league. And I'd really wish they were playing Florida sometime soon, like sometime during the stretch. Like that's the real measuring stick I want to see. Like I know that they're facing some of the top teams in the West, but you're not going to see any of them until the Cup final if you get there. Like Florida's the one that is right there in your division, right with you in the standings. They're the team like you almost know for sure is going to be standing in your way at some point. And I know you can only learn so much from one regular season game, but I would just be interested to see like how they match up right now, just what it looks like. And that they don't play again until the end of March, unfortunately. So we're not going to see it, but
well, that's a good time though.
Trade deadline. Yeah, it is.
then they play again like a week later. So it's like twice.
March and April. You get them twice right before the playoffs. And
yeah,
maybe that last one in April, is that the last game of the season?
No,
No. But maybe you're starting to see a little bit of load management by both of those teams at that point. Maybe not. There is still about 6 games left for both teams after that, so probably not. So you'll get your wish then, Scott. Hopefully those teams are hopefully by then it's the teams that you're entering the playoffs with, and we'll find out. But I want to see that matchup too. And you're right, Scott. Like, I think one of the reasons this Bruins team is second in the NHL, and it's to no fault of their own. I think the NHL this year is it's kind of anybody's game. Like, I can see any one of the 16 teams that make the playoffs this year going on a run. The parity is kind of it's really strong this year. There's not one team that's like running away with it like Boston last year, or teams in the past. It's like every team has their faults, to your point, Scott, even the best teams. And so I think it'll be a fun spring. It'll be a tough year, I think, for NHL playoff brackets out there.
Yeah, Vegas is going to take people's money again, as per usual. But what I was going to say is they also play Carolina twice in April. That's another team that could be, on their path to the Stanley Cup, depending on how far they make it. And that's another team that it'd be interesting to just see like the matchup of playoff readiness it'd be a good gauge for both of those teams to see like, a little bit of taste of that. I think those are the right teams to be playing at the end of the season. Obviously the very last game is Ottawa. That's different, but you're probably not playing people much in that game anyway. If you finish out with Pittsburgh, Washington and Ottawa. So, but right before that, it's like kind of a gauntlet of teams that are playoff teams in your conference. So, it'll be that will be an interesting stretch of the season for sure.
Yeah. I feel like Carolina's going to be the team to beat in the Atlantic over the Rangers. Like it's really only been goaltending that's held them back. And I know that's a big one that they have to figure out, but I don't, someone gets hot at the right time. Like we're talking about depth. The Rangers just lost Blake Wheeler for the season. And on the surface, you think like, oh, that shouldn't be that huge of a loss. And yet, 21 points in 54 games, like, right. Like that's nothing crazy. That was 6th among Rangers forwards in scoring. Like, just to give you an idea again of another team that's just extremely top heavy. Like, Blake Wheeler was basically a top 6 forward for that team. So,
yeah. I mean, I've been high on Carolina. I actually, like, dating back to the preseason, and Scott, I know you mentioned earlier on, like, their goaltending was treacherous and their Achilles heel in your mind. But I just think that group's been together for a while, and I love their defense, and I just think that team is really difficult to score on. And
frustrating. They're a frustrating team.
Yeah. And up front, no superstars, but just some really solid, players up front for them. And I think that if, speaking right now on February 20th, I could see them going to the Stanley Cup Finals against, a couple different teams out west. I like a few different teams, but I like Carolina coming out of the East. I'd say Carolina, then Florida, then maybe Boston,
Yeah, Carolina's another team that does definitely have the offensive depth. I should have mentioned them earlier, but it's funny. My preseason cup pick looked like laughably horrible for a couple months, and now
what was it
so bad. Edmonton over Carolina.
Oh okay. Yeah, I was laughing at you for the Edmonton thing back when they were sucking. So yeah, Scott, totally. Edmonton's definitely gonna. Did you have them to win, by the way?
Yeah, I had Edmonton. No, actually, did I? I'll have to look back. I might have. No, I think I had Carolina winning, actually.
Oh.
You flipped on them pretty quick once the season started. Carolina.
No, I didn't. I think I stayed pretty high on the team overall. I just said the goaltending sucked, which it did. But I still have serious questions about that goaltending. But we'll see.
Is it bad that I can't remember who I picked? Is it bad?
I don't remember who I picked either. I don't think it was Boston though.
It wasn't. It wasn't Boston.
I may have been something similar to Scott. Honestly, I may have changed it a little bit.
I think I picked Colorado.
I think you did pick Colorado. I think Brian might have picked Dallas.
Oh yeah,
you might have at least had Dallas there. I think, yeah.
Yeah, I think I did pick, and that's a team I am high on. I do like Dallas, and yeah, Robertson was like over 100 points last year, and I think right now he's on pace for 82. It's like a point per game maybe, so that's a big drop off. But Tyler Sagan's had a resurgence. Jimmy Benn's down a little bit, but yeah, I like Dallas's depth. Maybe we do get an 06 rematch with Edmonton and Carolina, but I don't know. I guess that's
networks would love that. I mean, at least you have McDavid, but not exactly the two best TV markets.
Well, neither is Sunrise, so hopefully, I mean, I don't think any one of those options the NHL wants, but
yeah, I think they would really love if the Eastern Conference Cup team got out of the Southeast and get one of those Northeast teams in there.
That's so true. Wait, so Florida and Tampa have been to the last 5 titles? Four?
Last 4, yeah, 2020 through 23.
All right. Well, guys, we've gone a little bit longer here. Any final discussion points before we sign off?
That the next game on Wednesday against Edmonton is at 10 p.m. So everybody just brace yourself for the fact that this game is getting over after midnight.
No, Bridget, you know what I really love, though, is when they have a 10 o'clock game and then they also have another late game the next night. That just does wonders for my sleep.
Well, yeah, no, that's what they're on a road trip where they're going to be doing a few of them because it's not just those two. Like I think they end the road trip with another 10 o'clock, right? So
yeah.
I mean,
at least the Saturday game in Vancouver, at least that's a 7 Eastern 4 local. Because I gotta say, I did not need a 10 o'clock game before Sunday skate.
No, definitely not.
So this episode currently will be dropping on Tuesday, correct?
Yeah, I'll post it right now.
So just looking ahead, we might have a bit of a finagled schedule this week. So maybe just looking at the Bruins schedule with the late games, maybe we drop the next episode Friday morning, potentially.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
So then,
yeah, get both of those games, Edmonton, Calgary, in there.
Okay. All right, so there won't be a Wednesday episode this week. Then it sounds like, but Friday we'll be back and talking about Edmonton and Calgary, and they're gonna want to avenge that Calgary loss. That was a stinker. So, all right, guys. Well, thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you very soon.
Okay, so one of the things that this podcast has been absolutely elite at is logging off and then immediately having news break, like within 10 to 15 minutes of us wrapping up. And sure enough, after Bridget, are we taking this on to the end of the episode?
Yeah.
Okay. So not even 10 minutes after we wrapped up the podcast you just listened to, Bruins announced that they have recalled Mason Lohrei from Providence, assigned Oscar Steen to Providence, which we knew was going to happen because they waived him, and moved Matt Poitras to long-term IR, which they had no reason to do yet, but was going to happen eventually just to free up cap space. So obviously the big item here is Mason Lohrei is back, and we figured that was worth touching on for at least a couple of minutes here. After that news broke, because we raised that possibility that they might need a defenseman. So my head immediately goes to, maybe there is some concern about Hampus Lindholm here. We don't know if that is the, direct 1-for-1 correlation. There was nothing in the press release that just came out about Hampus Lindholm, so I will note that.
Yeah, well, I just unfortunately, it just kind of makes us sound dumb at the beginning of the podcast where we're like, maybe Lohrei will get called up. Like, maybe. It's like, no.
You're smart. Makes it sound smart.
Oh, yeah. Well, it does. So in my mind, like, this is important to bring up because obviously it's a transaction and we've spent a chunk of the podcast talking about call-ups and who we want to see. But it also indicates that, like, the fact that the next call-up is a defenseman, and he's like one of your skilled defensemen, it indicates maybe that something is going on with Lindholm. So it could be coinciding with that. And obviously they didn't update that. They don't have to, because like I said, like Scott said earlier, they didn't have a practice today. Like there was no media availability on Tuesday. So Wednesday when or did they travel tonight or did they travel Wednesday morning?
They're traveling Tuesday.
Okay, so they're traveling Tuesday. So maybe we might hear if he got on the plane or not. So, but that will be later, or it will be 5 minutes after we finish the part 2 here, and then we'll have to tag on a part 3.
Yes, because the Bruins will have recalled Fabian Lysell from Providence.
And put Lindholm on IR and fired coach, and those are like literally we had Bruce Cassidy got fired like 10 minutes after we posted.
I mean, at this point, there's been so many. There's been so many. It's literally any time there's been breaking news. I think since 2021, it's been this way. It happened last week, 2 weeks ago. It's something.
What listeners should know is like when they see breaking news, that means like when they see it pop up on their Twitter, they should go, "Oh, I bet the skate pod just was recording."
Yeah, exactly. And now we know, like, every time we record a podcast, we just have to, shoot the shit afterwards for like 15 minutes, and then it'll come across the bow.
Which we were doing.
Which we were doing. But so for me, the first thing I think of is great, like good that he's back up here. And then of course there's the Brian in me that's like annoyed that it takes this for him to get called up. Like I want him there regardless. So
he's got the angel. He's got the angel over here.
Yeah.
It's like this Brian, and then this Brian is like, nah, this is the angry Brian is like the one that comes through more.
Yeah. Hey, every podcast needs a villain, right? I mean, we can't all be, just little.
Well, I thought we already decided that was Scott.
Oh, that's true. Scott, can you do your Joker voice again from Dark Knight?
Brian's definitely the most negative, though. So,
no, okay. Time out. First of all, I would say that you guys
on an admittedly usually pretty positive podcast overall. So,
yeah, but that's exactly. Look, I'm a huge Bruins fan. I want nothing for them but to succeed. But we have to have somebody who's gonna call them out here and there. You guys, I understand the game you guys play. You guys are in the locker room with them. You don't want to ruffle feathers. I'm not, so I don't mind saying a couple things here and there. But no, I definitely think that, like, I don't know why it takes an injury to Lindholm to call him back up, but it does. And so now I'm like, at the same time, yeah, that sucks. Like Lindholm could be gone for a bit of time here, but one thing at a time.
It also times out, I think, like injury wise, he was recovering. Like he did have something he was going through health wise. Yeah. So like, I don't know when he was fully healed for that. Scott, you might know the answer. Like, did he play in Providence a few games? Like they might have wanted him to, but they might have wanted to see what he looked like back for a few games there before sending him back up. So that could have affected the timing too. But obviously it has Lindholm, like it feels like it has something to do with that. Like Mondays.
Yeah. And I guess, at the risk of them announcing like Lindholm underwent season ending surgery right after we log off, Lohrei being called up, it doesn't mean it's anything long term or super serious with Lindholm. Like we don't know that. It could just be he's questionable for tomorrow, and they want to make sure they bring an extra defenseman on the trip. So
exactly. Hey, Xerxes is getting called up too. I think pretty soon.
Xerxes does not look thrilled to be on the podcast right now.
Xerxes is on a like Brazeau. I think Xerxes is still on a one-way AHL contract, so he's gonna sign an NHL deal first.
Xerxes was just thinking about eating my face for a second there. Say hi.
So
hi, Xerxes.
Xerxes, let me ask you: are you surprised that
she looks so miserable?
Xerxes, do you think that are you surprised the Bruins didn't call forward heading into this long West trip?
What do you think about that?
What you saying over there, Bridget? No? All right, well, I'll ask you guys, Scott and Bridget. Are you surprised that they didn't subsequently call up a forward in with this long West Coast trip coming up?
So since they did call up Lohrei, I'm not, because I don't think they could call anyone else up unless someone goes to injured reserve. Or maybe I don't know. I would have to look. I'm not going to try to do cat math here in real time because
You say cat math or cat math?
Both. I'm not doing either one. Yeah, that'd be disaster if I try to do this in real time. So, impossible. They can maybe also call up a forward. I don't know, but yeah, they didn't as part of this wave, and I would say if they don't before Wednesday, then to me that would at least be an encouraging sign that at least one of Richard or Lauko is good to go. We touched on both of them dealing with at least minor injuries, upper body in Lauko's case, lower body after a shot block in Richard's case.
All right. Well, we had to get that little 3-on-3 overtime session in because the news did just break, and again, like we said, there'll be something else breaking the second we finish here. So stay tuned for that on Friday probably. Any final thoughts on the Lohrei call up and what it means, or the Lindholm injury and whatnot?
No, I think that was a good overtime session. I think we actually tried to score. We weren't just circling back into the neutral zone, killing time, keeping possession. So
yeah, it was great.
I didn't get bit. So I don't know if you remember one time I picked up Xerxes and put him on camera and he immediately bit my finger so I would drop him. He thought about it, but he didn't do it.
It's the old Marchand Ryan Callahan special. or no, Burroughs and Bergeron.
Yeah, Burroughs Chomper. I called him.
By the way, we didn't even touch on this, but since we just mentioned overtime, Charlie Coyle was like hooked. It was like the most blatant hook in the history of hockey. And overtime
was yelling,
and both refs are looking right at it and didn't call it. But then I thought, you know what? Maybe a good thing because against the Kings, the Bruins got an overtime power play, and that's how they ended up losing the game. So
yeah, no, Scott literally yelled. He was like,
I don't think I actually
the fucking hook. Are you blind?
He's like, oh, come on!
You fucking blind?
started launching stuff over the edge of the press box.
Yeah, yep. And I think I heard him yelling "shoot" a few times at the end of regulation when McAvoy was backing up 200 feet away from the goal. That was the all-time.
By the way, because we haven't talked like on this podcast since the Kings game. By the way that Kings game ended, like nothing pisses me off more in the entire viewership of the game of hockey than like falling for the old guy out of the box, getting a breakaway and winning. It's like in scoring, like the power play. How do you not have the time management in your mind and like just the IQ to know he's coming out of the box, Pasta? You're one of the best players in the world. Like, what are you doing with that stupid cross-ice pass? It's like it's the oldest trick in the book. Like, I hate when teams fucking fall for that shit. Like, how do you succumb to a guy out of the box? Like, that's the one thing you're supposed to pay attention to when you're ending the power play. It's like that drives me crazy, especially when it ends a game.
Brian's so angry. Brian's so angry he's getting pixelated and breaking up. So.
Yeah, we had to blur him. Well, now this podcast has had everything. It had a Brian almost losing internet connection, like back to old times. It had us having to tack on another segment because they broke news right after we got off, and Xerxes made a reappearance, and yeah.
All right. Yeah, I'm
not
actually
organized
to be done now.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. All right. See you guys in 5 minutes when they do something else. All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.